Hello, and welcome back to another installment of Advance Your Wealth. I'm your host, Ryan Ruff. We've got Homer Smith standing by. He'll be joining me momentarily. But look, it's great to have you back for another episode. Today, we've got a great topic lined up for you today. Homer and I have spent a lot of time talking about family businesses and just the family dynamic as a whole. In fact, we covered the idea of whether or not you should be an executor on a family estate or an individual estate in our last episode. Today, we're going back to the family business element specifically. I know this is a big topic that Homer covers with his clients at Convergent Wealth Partners, so it's obviously a big topic that we want to address on the show here today. So the topic of the day is the stress testing process for successful family business owners. If you recall, in our inaugural episode on the show, we talked about the stress testing process overall, what that entails for an individual, what it looks like, the discovery process even during that first meeting with Homer and his team over at Convergent. But today we're diving into what the stress testing process looks like for family businesses, big and small. So I'm excited to get into this topic. So let's go ahead and bring Homer on here to get the conversation rolling. Homer, how you doing today? Good to see you.
I'm well, Ryan. Good to be here.
Yeah, excited about the topic today. With successful family businesses, I think one of the most important questions that they could be asking themselves really is how confident are they in the business's overall wealth plan? You're not going to get too far without a confident wealth plan. At the end of the day, there's so many moving variables within a family business that a stress testing process can really be beneficial, almost even more so than when looking at just an individual's portfolio. So you believe over at Convergent Wealth Partners that business owners are, relatively uncertain about whether, a company's planning is on track. They should be probably considering what it is, a stress test in that. Let's 10,000 foot view on the stress test for us. What does that entail?
And stress testing to me for a business owner is really important because their personal wealth and their business wealth and the planning around those are so heavily tied together, but often there's not a process in place that really puts all of the strategies and plans they have in place, through the motions and really make sure that all of those strategies are going to hold up under, multiple different scenarios. And so the stress testing process really is about, making sure that the planning is going to lead ultimately to the outcome that that business owner and the family really desires out of the business and out of their personal wealth planning. So, in the past, as we mentioned in earlier episodes, this whole idea of stress testing was really reserved for those with significant wealth, maybe 200, 300 million plus. But through advances in technology and some of the great professionals out there that have been willing to kind of buck the system and create these opportunities, really this ability to stress test your entire business and wealth picture has been really brought down to those that are more just on the high net worth side. So it's an opportunity really for private business owners that they should be taking advantage of.
Right. That's a huge point that we stressed a while back, and I'm glad you brought that one up as well. And Homer, here's the important thing to note when it comes to stress testing as well, and I'd love to have you elaborate on this, is obviously, a wealth plan sets up a given family business for a given goal or several goals. But stress testing along the way is ultimately designed to help the family business understand that place, that goal, the place they want to get to, well, they're on track for it. That, despite maybe a few hurdles along the way. Could you talk a little bit about the importance of how that periodic stress testing throughout the trek of getting to that ultimate goal is equally as important as establishing the wealth plan in the first place?
Yeah, it's really important to recognize that stress testing is much more about the results. Am I going to get what I want out of the plans that I have in place? And I think too often, top advisors and legal professionals really focus on the highly technical strategies they're putting into place. And are they these really technically brilliant ideas and strategies versus what is ultimately going to be the result? And is that what the business owner really wants out of the back end of this? So we often see that there's a real severe disconnect between the plans that are being put in place and the strategies and ultimately what that business owner wants from their plan.
Right. And Homer, so there's really, in our prior conversations, as well as the importance of today's discussion with the family business and all the dynamics that are intertwined within a family, business, is, really there's two parts of the conversation during the stress test. It's the focus on the data and the hard numbers, the spreadsheet that is involved with their family's finances. But then there's the other element, the human element, which plays a massive role in your conversations, your dealings, and then ultimately the suggestions and recommendations that you provide. So, walk me through the importance of those two conversations, the data and then the human element.
And so clearly the data and the numbers have to be run. And that's a
Right.
really critical component of the stress test and making sure that the numbers are going to work out the way that they're designed to be worked out. But often that human element is what's missing. And that's really the personal and emotional side of planning that really needs to be addressed. So it really entails looking at everything and everyone that's going to be impacted by the decisions made and everything and everyone that's important to that business owner and their family. And I was recently just doing a stress test and a review for a client, and there were a lot of technically brilliant ideas in that estate plan tied to a business transaction. But the problem was, as we actually walk through, well, what is this going to mean for your family? What is this going to mean for your kids and their relationship if you structure it this way? And we recognize that that human element really wasn't involved in the strategy part. And so really it's looking at that big picture. So a really high caliber stress test includes both the numbers, the strategies, those elements, along with making sure that that human element is really addressed.
Right. And now when looking at the specific goals that a stress test is meant to achieve, are there any certain concerns or areas that entrepreneurs tend to benefit most from when doing the stress test? Like, for example, achieving a specific goal or an aspect of their business. Or is there anything that stress tests really help achieve this specific goal or this, desire that the family business might be going for?
Yeah, stress testing can be really highly focused. So maybe on one particular issue, like the succession planning of the business and
Hmm.
which route that they might take. But also can be very broad in looking at a number of different areas that sometimes overlap and sometimes do not. And so the most common areas that we see a strong need for stress testing in a private business are first that succession or exit planning. So all of the different strategies you might use to exit your business, whether it's transitioning to your family or an outside party, asset protection planning, which is an area that we've been really diving into with clients recently, and we see a lot of gaps and opportunities in. And then retirement planning. So the different structures that you might have in place to not only benefit yourself as the business owner, but how do you take care of the employees if that's something that's also important to you? So those are the most common areas that we see either very specifically being addressed or that we're
Hmm.
looking at as a whole.
I'd really like to unpack each one of those because I think there's a lot in those, and because especially when it comes to a family business, those are elements that are going to be tackled at some point or another. So the first of which was exit planning. Walk us through the stress testing process when it comes to exit planning specifically.
And this one's a pretty big one because it
Hmm.
really incorporates both sides here. So there's corporate pre-planning for succession planning, and then there's the personal wealth planning side of it. And so I'll cover both. So on the corporate side, what we see often is that the business really hasn't been evaluated from the eye of a buyer by the existing business owner, meaning they're not really looking at it from how an outside party is going to view their company from a risk standpoint. And so they haven't really put in place things that are going to really reduce the risk from the eye of that buyer. So the first part of the stress testing is what are the 18 value drivers in your business, and how do we implement some projects over the next 1 to 5 years, depending on how much time they have, to really put the business in the best light for a transition. On the personal side, it really has to do with
Hmm.
estate planning and with tax planning. And we know that a lot of business owners are looking for how do we get the most net dollars at the end of the day out of this business. And there's a number of different strategies that can be implemented. From very simple strategies all the way to more complex strategies. And one of them that we look at a lot, oftentimes, is really freezing the value of the business. And it's a technique to really reduce future estate taxes. But really, only 1 in 10 business owners has even looked at that as a possible strategy. So we know that there's a lot of opportunities on the estate planning and the tax planning side to make sure that, if we do a good job on the corporate planning and we get maximum value out of the business, then how do we then make sure that most of those dollars end up in the pocket of that business owner or their family?
Right. So a ton to unpack when it comes to exit planning specifically, but you would also mention the second one was asset protection planning, how stress tests can really help on this front. Walk us through this one.
Yeah, and this one's a big one. What we know from a survey done or research done on private business owners is that 85% of them are concerned about being involved in an unjust lawsuit. However, when we've stress test the work they've done within the business, whether it's working on the structure of the business or the liability protection they have in place, very few have really addressed that in a way that's going to keep them out of being a target from a risk standpoint. So, whether it's indemnification language, in their documents, or just the general liability protection they have in place, umbrella policies, directors and officers coverage. There's a lot of areas to be looking at. And it's just an area that we find most business owners really don't have a lot of knowledge around. And really, for that reason, aren't comfortable really diving into it. And so don't understand the risks that they're putting out there within their business.
Got it. And Homer, that third avenue that you had mentioned was retirement planning. How does stress testing really reinforce retirement planning strategies as a whole?
Now, a lot of the business owners that we work with before we met them had some form of a retirement plan in place,
Hmm.
but they didn't really necessarily have it optimized for their ultimate goals. So sometimes the goal is maximizing the dollars that go to the owner and the management team or the highly compensated employees. Other owners want to maximize the dollars that go to the rank and file employees, and so really making sure that the plan they have in place is designed, for that. Also, right now it's really difficult to hire and retain top talent. There's a lot of competition out there. And so, if that's a goal of the business owner, helping them design a plan that's going to be really good at attracting that talent and retaining them is important. But also, again, if their goal ultimately is to get to retirement and have the most dollars in their pocket, how do we structure a retirement plan that takes care of the retirement savings they need, but has some great tax advantages to it as well? So there's lots of qualified, non-qualified plans out there that we can be looking at and stress testing to make sure are the right fit for that business owner.
Got it. And so stress testing as a whole, I mean, needless to say, is really a really robust process. There are a lot of different, avenues that you can use to make sure you're making the best decisions given your specific goals and plans. We've thrown a lot at our audience in this episode so far, Homer. Let's bottom line it for them. Ultimately, how can business owners decide whether or not stress testing is something they should pursue, something that's worthwhile for them? What would be your bottom line to them, in terms of the importance of undergoing stress testing on a regular basis?
Yeah, there's a number of questions that business owners should be asking. One of the first ones is, when was the last time you evaluated how you have personally structured your ownership in the company, especially when it relates to a potential future sale of the business or protecting yourself from a potential lawsuit? Also, another question is, when was the last time you reviewed the indemnification language in your corporate documents? And another really big one is, when was the last time that you reviewed the financial and legal steps that would be involved if something were to happen to either you or one of your partners, whether it's a death or disability? What would happen in the company, and is that really what you want to have happen with that? So, if you're not sure of those answers, a stress test is something that really is going to be important to make sure that really your values, your goals, what you want to have happen in those scenarios is ultimately how you've designed the company and the structure of the company to ultimately make sure that your goals and your wishes are really what's going to happen in the future of the company.
And Homer, that's kind of the backbone of the stress testing process, why you should consider it. Are there any other last little intangible elements, anything that you want to leave our viewers with, our audience with, when it comes to this stress testing process overall?
Yeah, I think another important thing to keep in mind is things change. So,
Right.
5 years ago, you might have had an idea in place of how you wanted things to work out.
Hmm.
But things change, whether it's tax laws that change, estate planning laws that change, or just the structure of your business. Maybe you had a family member that ultimately you had planned to be the succession plan for the business, and they're no longer part of that. And so, doing a regular review, especially with those three questions that we just discussed around the corporate structure, the indemnification language, how things are going to work out in a death or a disability of a partner. Those are all things that you need to review on a regular basis. But some of the other ones that, because of changes that happen is, how have legal and tax law changes, how are you taking advantage of all of the opportunities out there to make sure you're reducing your tax bill as much as possible, both now and in the future? And Are you making sure you're taking care of all of the corporate risk mitigation strategies available to you? And finally, when it comes to the retirement plan, have you evaluated all of those options available to you, whether it's non-qualified or qualified plans, to not only maximize the benefits to you as the owner, but also to reward and retain top employees out there. So really, from any of those perspectives, it's important for business owners and entrepreneurs to consider the stress testing process. Make sure your strategies are up to date, taking advantage of all the current tax laws and opportunities out there. And if things have changed in your life, making sure that the plan you have in place has accounted for those changes.
Roger that. And Homer, as our audience probably knows, we live, you live and breathe this stuff. This is really important that we address the stress testing process and its importance, and the importance of regularly going about it, because yes, things change, dynamics change, laws change, regulations change, everything changes. It's not going to be a one size fit all plan for any business, and that plan is certainly not going to be stagnant the entire time. So really a lot to consider here from the family business perspective. So thank you so much for shedding some light on it for us today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it.
And hey, look, we want to thank you, our audience, our individuals that have joined us today for the show. If you liked what you saw, you liked what you heard, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, share this knowledge with friends and family. There's a lot to learn from the stress testing process, specifically for individuals, and then also for family businesses and all the elements that are packed in to the family business dynamic. So ultimately, we really appreciate you joining us here today. For Homer Smith, I'm Ryan Ruff saying so long, and we thank you so much again for joining us on Advance Your Wealth.